A Hoosier native and lifelong investigative journalist, I already had extensive knowledge of Indiana corruption. Only this time, I was observing from the inside, and what I saw terrified me. It happened when I was hired to work the Delphi murder trial as a fact-finding investigator.
Welcome to the Delphi Dirt. My name is Erica Morse. I'm a private investigator, a lifelong journalist, victims advocate, and I've worked in the world of the missing and murdered for over 15 years now. We have a lot to get to today. It's been a long time since we've talked. I am extremely grateful to be back, although the last 3 months have been pretty intense, and I know you all have a lot of questions. I have a lot of answers, fortunately, and there's just so much to get to. So, before we officially dive in, I want to take a moment to welcome all of our newcomers to this episode, because there will be many. Our efforts to collaborate with others have increased exponentially over the last 90 days. And we are welcoming many new sets of ears to this particular episode. This episode has come together with a lot of thought, a lot of discussion on the part of our team, collaborations with others, and we want to take a moment to welcome everyone who is joining us in this fight to expose Indiana corruption. Over the last 3 months, we have met with and spoken to some incredible people who are new to this case, but not necessarily new to Indiana's corruption. And it is a shocker to me how many people from the Hoosier State still don't know about Delphi or understand the intricacies of the corruption involved, and how often I find myself educating very intelligent people, even people within the law enforcement system and the judiciary, and folks within the legal system who listen to the facts of the case, do their own research, and come back and say, holy shit, what has happened here? This is such a travesty of justice. And we have been very blessed over the last 3 months to encounter many individuals who feel that way and who are now on board with us, not just to try to get Rick out of his situation, his wrongful conviction and incarceration, but also to bring justice to the girls, to Abby and Libby, as well as to help bring justice to many other victims. This is the crazy part. There are many unsolved cases around Indiana. There are many unsolved cases around the Midwest. There are many unsolved cases nationwide. And we're going to get into that a little bit more later on when I smack some hands and educate some folks on just how unimportant some of you NPCs out there are to this case and to the missing community as a whole. Trust me, we'll educate you. But for right now, I just want to say that there are a lot of cases unsolved nationwide. And some of those cases connect to one another. And we have been fighting to find the right people and the right partners and the right individuals who have knowledge of those cases and have the pieces to those puzzles. And as Prof has told you many times already, we're getting very, very close. So, to those new ears, if you are listening to us from Michigan City, LaPorte, Wanata, Westville, Knox, South Bend, Plymouth, Fort Wayne, Delphi, Monticello, Logansport, Fishers, Carmel, Indianapolis, Terre Haute, Evansville, all of these cases, or all of these cities and towns I've just named, come with new friends attached. People you don't know about, bad guys. People the cops don't know about. People who have authority in other jurisdictions, far outside the reach of certain pigs. Anyway, to the newcomers, you advocates, journalists, private investigators, other law enforcement officials, members of the judiciary, the legal field, paralegals, firefighters, coroners, detectives, advocates, families, witnesses, and living victims. To every one of you who has come forward over the last 3 to 4 months, I thank you. I thank you tremendously. Your courage and bravery is to be commended. Your willingness to speak up where others will not is appreciated. And your anonymity remains our number one goal. The last time I talked with you all, it was on a live. I believe it was October 4th of 2025. And I was heartbroken that night. I read to you a press release from the Michigan City, Indiana Police Department naming a woman, Sharon Chappell, well, they said Corbin, Kentucky, but of a native of Michigan City, as a victim who had been driven into Lake Michigan and drowned, her life stolen, taken maliciously by a man who remains to this day unnamed, by a department who continuously fails to address this case, in a community known for its police corruption and cover-ups. You are welcome to draw whatever conclusions you want from that statement, but the continued refusal to name the man who drove Sharon Chappell into Lake Michigan makes it look like the Michigan City Police Department is covering up yet another death, yet another crime. Every time something like this happens, we ask the question, why? And what no police officer wants us asking is why. Because every time we have to ask why, we find 50 different reasons. Taking the life of Sharon Chappell was the final straw for me. If you thought I was angry when Rick Allen was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to 130 years in prison for crimes he did not commit, you cannot fathom how angry I was on the evening of October 4th upon learning that a source whose tip I finally exposed just 8 days earlier on this very program ended up dead, driven into Lake Michigan by a man who continues to have his identity protected by a police department with 50 plus years of corruption. Again, draw your own conclusions. If you think I'm making it up, Google will be your friend. So will Pacer, so will DocsPop, so will my case. Because, let me tell you folks, I'm not here to prove jack shit anymore. You killed my source. All bets are off. There is no mercy left to be had. I've been quiet because I've been moving in silence, making new friends all over the country and beyond. And I've been letting my main man Prof out there do the heavy lifting. And boy, has he done a tremendous job. Prof is so laser focused right now that he is commanding everyone's attention, and rightfully so. See, this troll farm, these cranks of which he speaks, these folks are probably paid handsomely to distract. That's their only objective. That's their only directive, is to distract so that people like Prof and myself and Chris and others cannot focus clearly and think. Because when we think, we figure shit out. And trying to keep Prof distracted, and trying to keep me distracted, and trying to keep Chris distracted, and trying to keep Clint distracted, and others who shall continue to remain nameless for their safety, it only works for so long, especially when we can anticipate the same old tired behaviors. That's the thing, y'all are working by the same playbook, county by county, throughout the state. We are finding that the playbook that ISP uses pretty much throughout the whole northern and central region of the state, anybody who works for Holman, uses the same old tired playbook. False arrests, and it's even a very specific list of stuff that they're getting people on. You know, things like forgery and fraud for cops and city employees, animal abuse, harassment for people like me, Mitch Westerman, all your whistleblowers, Todd Click. They use the same tactics. They use the same charges. They use the same old tired playbook. If they don't set your house on fire. Because if you're not familiar with the number of arsons associated with the Delphi case, I suggest a little bit of Google time on YouTube. It will do you wonders. So to all of our new friends, everyone who is coming together behind the scenes to put their heads together. And listen, I'm not talking about people just sharing information. I'm talking about presentations being made to law enforcement agencies. I'm talking about federal agencies picking up the phone and having conversations with us. Finally, I had a 45-minute conversation, unexpected, with a federal law enforcement agency 2 weeks ago. And at the end of that conversation, not only did I have hope that things are going to move forward, but for the first time ever in this mess, I received an apology from a law enforcement official. That person said to me, on behalf of everyone who screwed up, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what you've been through. I'm sorry for what your family's been through. I'm sorry for what your team has been through. I'm sorry for what your children have been through. None of this should have been allowed to happen. And yet it did. And so if you hear a difference in my voice, it's because the confidence level is through the roof right now. Not because I think I'm the shit. Oh, trust me, my stalkers will tell you that's the reason. We got surprises for you too, homies, so keep it up. I'm confident because we're making progress. I'm confident because cases are going to be solved. I'm confident because geofence information is being shared across agencies. I'm confident because we now understand how law enforcement has been tracking us. I'm confident because official complaints and lawsuits are finally in the works. I'm confident because I knew that come January of 2026, the entire landscape of my situation was going to change. And I'm not alone in that. We had to get through the holiday season. We had to get through Rick's appeal deadline. We had to let the appellate lawyers do their thing, and we couldn't say things that we now can address, things that we've been holding on to for 2+ years. See, I'm normally used to being behind a microphone or behind a keyboard, writing a story. I'm used to sharing these details. But I have been gagged and NDA'd up the yin-yang, and then I was hit with a false charge, and then falsely arrested on a second charge. I was accused heinously of animal abuse. Not just of animal abuse, but of killing a cat whom I personally loved very much. I was traumatized, and rightfully so. I was angry and bitter, and rightfully so. And a lot of people made bad decisions about the way they handled themselves with me over the last 2 years. And those folks knew come January, everything was going to change and I was going to come out rip roaring anyway. But taking Sharon Chappell's life, that took that shit to a whole new level. There is no mercy to be had anymore. We are going to lay out for you, time and time again, program after program, shit that is going to continue to blow your mind. Only this time, you're going to start to see the arrests. 2026 is going to be the year that people involved in the cover-up of this case finally see the inside of a jail cell. They just don't know which ones are going down first, and that's part of this strategy. We had to find the weakest links, identify those little brats, and figure out who's going to cave, who's going to turn on whom first, and then set our sights on that low-hanging fruit. Because there is no point in arresting the asshole at the top who thinks he can sustain arrest and a little bit of bad press. Oh no, we need to find the weak ones, the ones who are going to panic and start speaking the minute the cuffs go on them and the cameras start flashing. No mercy will be had this time around. And let me tell you something. If you think Prof is embellishing when he says we are close, he's not. But we can't yet even say what it is we're close to. Because this situation turned out to have so many damn layers, it's mind-boggling. Like, I'm going back and now looking at tips from 10 and 15 years ago. And I originally thought I was only going to need to look at tips from maybe the last 5 to 7 years. No, there's something else I want to just briefly touch on before I go into this next section. About 6 months ago, I was handed a gold mine of information, and I sat on it. And very few people, less than 5, know this information exists. It has been, well, it was first and foremost secured, copied, and now it's being evaluated. But I can tell you that someone in the meth trafficking realm messed up badly. And they left a device somewhere with every connection from the UP of Michigan all the way down to southern Kentucky. We have names, we have numbers, we have messages, we have quantities. We have all of it. And so do the feds now. And the beauty of sitting on this information and not telling anyone for 6 months we had it besides those feds was that by the time I made this little announcement, enough people had this information that even if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, it's still moving forward. Someone messed up badly. None of you know. If you're listening to this and you're part of that little network from the UP of Michigan down to LaPorte County, all the way into southern Kentucky, you have no clue which person screwed up. But I can tell you that one of your boys ain't even using passwords. All right, folks. This next part it's going to be a little fun for me. It is the ultimate FU to a system so big that it thought it was untouchable and that its power could overcome any collective who sought to expose it. And I remain enamored with and by those brave and fierce and courageous people, those amazing diamonds and gems in the rough, who dedicate their lives their hearts and their passions to helping families of the missing and deceased. I'll say in advance, I apologize if I get a little emotional. This one it's a big deal for me and for some others. So, anyway, there are some folks who think they are big men on campus because they've been involved in this case. I can think of a handful of folks who think that their shit don't stink because they may be YouTubers or content creators in the land of Delphi. And I am here to tell you to sit down, shut up, and learn things. To the rest of you, I am here to let you in on a plan that has been in place now for a few years. For the last 15 years, Christine Salzer and I have worked together as a team alongside a man named Clint Dunn, the father of deceased Haley Dunn. And when Chris and I first began partnering, I'd say Chris and I were probably, our teams started working together back in 2012. So Chris and I are probably 13 years now. Chris already had a team established in LaPorte County called Moms on a Mission. Most of you don't know that. Christine has decades of experience working in children's advocacy and missing persons. She has done an amazing job. She has led a team that has extreme knowledge and experience in water rescues, ground and search and rescues, horses, ATVs. She's a master at kayak rescue. And Christine is one of the best in the advocacy field in terms of mapping and searching and putting together grids. Now, many of you don't know that because, as I referenced earlier, Chris and I have been gagged for the last 2 years. We weren't allowed to talk about the Delphi case, let alone who we were or what our history is. So a lot of folks came into this Delphi case and then heard our names as trial was starting, and all they did was jump in to that sandbox of, let's go after these trial investigators. Well, what these idiots didn't bother to do was look up our resumes. Okay? Christine and I are two of the most respected and revered with many families of the missing, and definitely with those in positions of authority and decision making for the community as a whole. So I've had to swallow my pride a bit over the last couple years and let some folks talk their smack, knowing that there was going to be a day that I was going to be able to tell you how wrong you were and to educate you on how very little you know about what's going on really in Delphi. Prof told you the other night, if you watched his show from, I think it was Friday, he said, and the way he said it was, oh my God, so authentic. He was like, this case is bigger than any of us ever imagined, even me. And then he's like, much bigger, or something to that effect. Recently, even Prof has had that epiphany. I think for the longest time, he had a really good handle on one aspect of how deeply this case runs, but it wasn't until maybe a week or two ago that he was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, that's what we're really dealing with. So, if you have worked in the field of the missing and deceased, then you know the name Todd Matthews. For those of you who have not had the pleasure, J. Todd Matthews was known as the pioneer of internet sleuthing. He became obsessed with a young girl whose identity was unknown, a little girl found deceased, and she became known as Tent Girl. And Todd Matthews, a factory worker from rural Tennessee, wanted to give this little girl an identity. He wanted to know her name. And so Todd did what all of us in the missing persons and advocacy world end up doing, which is he became hyper focused on one case, and that one case led to an incredible and unexpected shift in the trajectory of his life. And Todd Matthews became the mentor to us all in the world of the missing. He was so dedicated after identifying Tent Girl to then identifying any other missing person whose name was unknown. And Todd developed and created a database of unknown individuals that came to be known as the Doe Network. And then a few years after the creation of the Doe Network, Todd was tapped by the Department of Justice to lead a new initiative known as NamUs. NamUs stands for the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Todd was invited to by the DOJ, present for and a key player in the focus groups that were held in advance of the creation of the NamUs system by the federal government. And Todd was then tapped to lead NamUs and the inputting of hundreds of thousands of cases. He helped develop the different sections, the missing persons sections, the unidentified sections, and then the unclaimed section. If you worked in the arena of missing persons and were someone who was to be taken seriously, you knew Todd Matthews. And Todd and I had the pleasure of stumbling across one another very early on in my tenure. I think we met as far back as 2011. We became instant friends. We spent dozens of hours on the phone together throughout the years. Todd suffered from a lifelong heart condition that many of us knew about, and he wasn't expected to live past a few years when he was first born. So Todd Matthews was someone who always took every single day as a gift and an unexpected blessing, and he made the most of every day that he was on this planet. His gap in this arena, in this community, will never be filled, ever. But Todd knew he was sick, and those of us who knew him well knew he was sick. I didn't know specifically. He kept some of it from me towards the end because I had just gone through this massive loss of a whole bunch of friends or a whole bunch of family members, and Todd knew I was really suffering. So he didn't tell me at the very end how close he was to the end. But in speaking with some others, he knew. In the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years prior to his death, Todd and I had some very candid conversations about what was expected of me and others when he was gone from this earth. So, unbeknownst to me in that time, Todd was preparing me and others for what our responsibilities were, what he expected us to take and run with and take over in this arena once he was gone. And one of the things that Todd made me promise that I would do is to focus on education through writing and through programs. And so I've spent the last 2 years quietly developing some programs at Todd Matthews' request, programs that will be rolled out this year that I'm very excited, initiatives that I'll be working on with investigators and advocates and reporters, and a lot of training materials, a lot of stuff for families, because education is key in this community. And Todd was huge on that, and mentoring was everything to him. So he believed that I was one of the people within the missing persons arena who should take that portion of his torch and run with it. And I have intended to do it, and I've held a lot of anger and resentment towards this Delphi case because I've been burnt out just as a person, and I haven't been able to keep my promises to Todd. I created these programs after he died. I I jumped on the computer. I worked for weeks straight and developed some of this stuff. And then it just kind of sat there because all of this bullshit and nonsense happened in Delphi. I started getting falsely charged with crimes. I was falsely arrested. My home was stolen from me. I was run off of jobs. I was run out of Michigan City. The police were after me. Like, how do you sit down and write books and put together classes when you're having to move and you're having to run and it just whatever. The fact that I'm still standing here is a testament to my own strength and my own resilience, and that's also one of the reasons why Todd chose me for what I'm about to share. Todd Matthews left this earth on January 3rd of 2024, unexpectedly to some of us, but not everyone. His heart finally gave out, and at the very young age of 53, James Todd Matthews left us. Chris and I were smack dab in the middle of Delphi. I didn't even take time to grieve. I couldn't. Todd meant too much to me. About 2 months after his passing, I was sitting at home one evening and received a text message from someone in the missing persons community whom I hadn't spoken to in years. This person told me they had information that I needed to hear, and that it was time. I picked up the phone. I called this individual and was told that I was in danger, that the Delphi case was not what it seemed, that it was part of something much bigger, and that the connections involved with that particular case go all the way to the top. I was told that this information was coming directly from Todd Matthews. And that prior to his death, Todd had placed phone calls to specific individuals, alerting them that I had no idea how big the Delphi case was, how far it reached, and that at some point he feared for my life and my safety. And that person was calling to tell me that arrangements had been made for a safe house. And that as soon as I could get my charges dismissed, I was to leave Indiana and get the hell out of there so that I could begin collaborating with others on a much greater level so that we can stop this as a community. Prior to his death, about 2 years, maybe 3, I'd have to go back and look. The date really doesn't matter because they screwed over my friend and mentor, so I really don't care what date they did it. But Todd Matthews went from running NamUs to suddenly being forced out of NamUs. Very unexpectedly. And it was a very secretive exit. He wasn't talking about it, other than in the months leading up to his unexpected and abrupt departure from NamUs, which again is owned and housed at the Department of Justice, if you're paying attention, that Todd had begun to push back on some issues that were occurring in the development of a new NamUs system called NamUs 2.0. And throughout that upgrade and the development of that upgrade on the back end, Todd observed some issues involving data on cases. The suggestion was made, or the allegation was made, that data was disappearing, data was incomplete, cross matches hadn't been done, testing wasn't being done, DNA testing wasn't being done, and that there were these new features being rolled out with the upgrade that caused Todd concern, like this sudden mandatory login that the DOJ wants to require for people to look up NamUs cases. Todd was a big believer in anyone should be able to go to NamUs.gov and find any piece of information on any missing, unclaimed, or unidentified person without having to give up their name. Because, we're dealing with missing and deceased and unclaimed and unidentified human beings. Not everybody needs to know who's looking into these cases. So there was this concern that why all of a sudden did the DOJ want to require people to sign up and log in to get access to this information? So that was issue number one. Issue number two was this data weirdness that was taking place. Issue number three was the allegation that in these cases that had this weirdness going on, Todd had taken it upon himself, along with another advocate, to cross-match NCMEC, and that there were allegations that these particular cases that had hinkiness going on were also cases that in the NCMEC system didn't have age progressions or even updated age progressions. So it was like Todd's finding this weirdness allegedly on the back end of NamUs. He's asking questions and he's being told not to. He then starts to kind of cross-reference against NCMEC and starts saying, well, wait a minute, we don't even have age progressions on these cases. And then that's when he reportedly put it together that all of the cases in question involved allegations of trafficking. Now, I'm smart enough at this point in this damn situation to not go making direct allegations against anyone. I'm also smart enough as a journalist to have no problem reporting what a dead man told a third party. Good luck going after Todd for this one. See how that works? Todd lost his position at NamUs because he asked questions about the wrong cases. And something he saw in the back end of that software caused him to place phone call to someone else and say, Erica's going to need help at some point. I think her life may be in danger. Okay? So I listened to this whole thing. And I'm telling you what, it's the fact that it came from Todd that I believed it, because I've known the man for 15 years. I believe every word out of his mouth. He is by far, ask anyone. Todd Matthews was the most loved and respected man in all of the missing persons community. Mark my words. He didn't have an enemy. Todd found stuff he shouldn't have found. That's the bottom line. So I heard this person out, and they gave specific examples, cited specific cases, and I was able to do my homework quickly and efficiently. And I knew within a day, if less, that not only that what I was being told was accurate, but that Todd had stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to know. And it cost him his job, and it broke his heart, and his heart eventually gave out. But he was smart enough to put plans in place for me and others to move forward, to take this information and do what we needed to do with it, which is expose it. Now here's where it gets super crazy. 2 days after that first call, I got a second call from someone I've never met who tracked me down at the request of Todd Matthews. This person, damn near verbatim, reiterated what the first caller told me. They'd had multiple conversations with Todd leading up to his death. Todd felt I was in danger. He knew the Delphi case was going to come after me. He already saw that I was in trouble, but he was too sick, and he needed to make arrangements for my safety and for me to have people to lean on, a community of support who wouldn't just be there for me, but who would seek me out and say, Todd sent me, so you're safe. Because very few people at that point were going to make me feel safe. I was being hunted by law enforcement. I wasn't being protected by the trial lawyers. I was being thrown in jail for crimes I didn't commit. My face was being plastered all over the press, calling me a monster and an animal killer. None of those things were true. Todd knew I was up to my eyeballs, and he knew I needed a way out. So he didn't just make arrangements with me with the first person, he made arrangements with me with the second person as well. Now this is someone no one knows about. No one knows this person's identity but me. That was also part of the plan. That I was to never reveal the other person's identity because that person and their connections are so important to us putting this thing to bed. Todd knew things were getting ready to go south in the Delphi case. Todd knew I needed help. And he knew I needed help because he figured out that there's hinkiness, allegedly, going on in the back end of NamUs as it pertains to child trafficking cases. Now, anybody who hasn't done their homework on the history of Indiana needs to understand just how many policymakers, just how many big pharma execs, just how many politicians, judges, lawyers, financiers, and white men of power and authority exist in the Hoosier state and would have a reason to want certain cases being hindered in the back end of a nationally accessible database of missing children. See, one of the things, the interesting part about this is the timing of when Todd lost his gig. Because when I say Todd was like the pioneer and is loved by all the families and we've done work together. Okay, so years and years and years ago, Todd tapped me and Mo from Missouri Missing and a few others to help Bill and Jan Smolinski on something called the Help Find the Missing Act, Billy's Law. And they wanted to create, Todd alongside the Smolinski family, a missing Billy Smolinski out of Waterbury, Connecticut. It's a heartbreaking case. It's one of my top cases that remains unsolved because of all this Delphi nonsense. And I really need to get back to work. So anyway, Todd tapped a whole bunch of us to work on the Help Find the Missing Act with the Smolinskis. Senator Chris Murphy out of Connecticut. To pass a law requiring NamUs be a federal law, that all law enforcement enter missing persons within X amount of days of their reported disappearance to law enforcement. And what's interesting about the implosion of Todd's job is that this kind of all coincided with us finally getting the Help Find the Missing Act passed. Biden signed it into law. That the whole story of that is actually available on Victims News Online about how oh my gosh, we all rushed at the last minute to get the House and Senate to pass this, and we were like scrambling, and then all of a sudden it passed, and oh my God, NamUs is now federal law. The problem with that is now it's federal law, and it requires that all missing children be put into this database more quickly. Missing adults, I think they may have up to 30 days. I'd have to check the law. But missing children are specific to this law, and it's an expedited aspect of this law. So children who are being abducted and trafficked are now required to be put in the system, and that's a little bit inconvenient for the folks who take them. And we had all just worked our butts off to get this law passed. And then suddenly there's this upgrade going on, and Todd notices they want more information about who's trying to access the database and certain aspects and elements, and maybe who's digging deeper. Y'all don't even know how many thousands of hours advocates spend on NamUs trying to cross-match everything from a tennis shoe to a piece of jewelry against a search site where items have been recovered, and map that out, or how we track serial killers that way. Like, the possibilities are endless with NamUs, and when it's tracked and people know who's digging up that information, it puts all of our lives at risk. And whatever happened, I don't know, because Todd didn't tell me directly. That's the beauty of what he did. He reached out to 2 people. He made those people confidential sources for me. And then those people reached out to me on his behalf after his death to say, this is what we're dealing with. This is what's really going on in Delphi and beyond. So when Prof kind of gave you that whole, guys, this is worse than any of us thought. Much, much worse. We had just had that conversation. I had just kind of filled him in on the rest of the story. And I think his head was still exploding a little bit. So that's where we're at, folks. This isn't one case. This is a myriad of cases. There are cases involving methamphetamine trafficking, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, all sorts of drug trafficking. And the human victims in this, for some strange reason, some of them, their cases aren't accurate in the back end of NamUs, which means they're not accurate in the viewable portion of NamUs. That's the allegation, is what I'm being told. This affects cases, I am told, all the way back to the 1970s. He was so strategic in what he chose to share and how he chose to share it. And he knew that at some point I was going to have this conversation with y'all. He probably didn't expect me to have it with the Delphi community. He probably expected me to have it on a missing persons channel, because that was one of the plans. That I was supposed to start a missing persons channel. And that's what Victims News on Air is. But I decided to rope it into this Delphi conversation for purposes of a few things. Number one, for telling those content creators out there who think that just because they think they're big men on campus in Delphi, Indiana, doesn't mean shit. Y'all don't know what you don't know, okay? This thing is so much bigger than anyone realizes. And someone or something at the Department of Justice doesn't want people asking questions. So for those of you who didn't do your homework on who Chris and Erica really are and how much juice we have in this community, that's on you, man. If you want to listen to trolls and people from the Haley Dunn case, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Folks don't know what they don't know right now. And those Haley Dunn trolls, they're going to get some folks thrown in jail if y'all aren't careful. They're talking to little girls. They're breaking the law. These folks are under serious investigation right now. So keep playing with pedos. You're going to get yourself in trouble. It really is no skin off my teeth. I have confidence in my voice for a reason. I know things. And I just want to throw in this shameless little plug. If you haven't listened to it yet, I highly encourage everyone to go find Todd's podcast. It is called Hello, John Doe. It is an incredible tale, an absolutely incredible tale of Todd getting hooked into this case that he tried to rope me into. I talked to the guy like once or twice, and I was like, dude, he needs you, not me. Like, I can help you tell this story later, but he needs you as an advocate, not me. But this is the craziest story. It's about a man who didn't know his identity and Todd's quest to help him find his identity. And it turns into like all of these different cases. It's crazy. And first and foremost, I've listened to this thing I don't know how many times, because when I'm having a bad day or I need to be reminded of why I do this job or do this work, I need to hear Todd's voice to remind me. And so having that podcast at my fingertips and hearing that southern drawl just kind of saying it's going to be okay. This is why we do what we do. He talks about and integrates his experiences and becoming a victim's advocate, his personal experiences, and talks about Tent Girl and things like that. So it really allows you to get to know Todd even though he's gone. And I love that he was able to get this podcast out. I kid you not. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but Todd, he cut this and then he died. It was crazy. It was like this man had this to-do list of stuff that he was checking off, and he accomplished a lot of it. But leaves, again, just this insane gap and hole in our lives, in the lives of the families, and my God, in Lori's life and his children and his loved ones. I mean, it's just insane. But what we're dealing with here is so much bigger than anyone realizes. And it has taken me almost 2 years from the time I received that first phone call to accept what I was being told, to accept that it was coming as a directive from Todd, to rationalize my way through this and think through it logically and ask myself, am I crazy for this? Because I'm not. And to really get a sense of, how are we going to fix this? How are we as a community going to take the information Todd left us and utilize it to the best of our abilities? Well, for us, the advocates, investigators, journalists, we've created a network behind the scenes. And that's all I'll say right now. But there is a massive effort underway of some of the best and brightest in this field, putting their heads together, comparing cases, comparing notes, comparing killers, comparing all of this stuff, and looking at our cases and looking not just at the overlap, but the money men. We're looking at this path between Northwest Indiana and Southern Kentucky. It's a direct route. It involves the UP. It goes all the way up to UP in Michigan, but from what I understand, it really, really is heavy in LaPorte County, Michigan City, LaPorte area. You gotta understand, like when I say this stuff, Elvis and JP were headed to Michigan City to allegedly drop a load of meth. I cannot stress that enough. Two key people whose names keep coming up as potentially being involved with the death of Abby and Libby were supposed to be going straight to my hometown to drop off a bunch of meth the morning after these girls were taken. I want to tell you a story. This story dates back to about 1990, I'd say 95 maybe. I was 18, 19 years old, college student with my first apartment. I was working 3 jobs to put myself through college, and I lived in an apartment that was 2 feet away from the entrance to one of my jobs at an answering service. The answering service was upstairs in the apartment building. My door was right next to it. And I had a roommate from the answering service who stayed with me for a while. I'm not going to give out any names. She's long deceased. It is what it is. But she and her boyfriend, I found out, were dealing coke, okay? And I kicked her out. And she called me within maybe a week of her leaving to tell me that she had just been arrested for possession of cocaine. Large quantity. And that she was facing something like 20 to life. And she was calling me to apologize for putting me in that position and basically to tell me to have a good life. And she didn't think she was going to see anybody again. It was really like a I'm sorry and goodbye call. So I wished her the best. I said a prayer for her. I was like, well, She shows up at my house the next day. She had trial the next morning. Later that night, she shows up at my house, at my apartment. And she was a real bubbly girl for the most part. She was like, hi. That's just how she was. And she shows up and she's all giddy. And I'm like, I am so confused right now. You told me yesterday you're like facing 20 to life. What are you doing here? And she's like, well, funny story. It turns out the judge offered me a plea deal. He told me that there was a plea deal on the table, that I could get a lot lesser sentence if I gave up the names of my distributors and if I gave up the names of any high-profile clients in Michigan City. And I'm like, really? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, what'd you say? And she goes, I turned to the judge, I looked at my lawyer, I looked at the judge, and I said, well, does it count if my lawyer gets his coke from me? Guys, this has been going on in LaPorte County, in Michigan City and LaPorte, since I was a teenager. Okay? A teenager. And this particular defense attorney, this criminal defense attorney, has a long history and reputation of using nose candy. And he built a very big law firm, my apologies, defending some of the worst, making a lot of money doing it. Guy buys some snazzy ass suits, I'll tell you. And if you've ever heard me tell the story before about the candy dish, oh, the trolls hate that story, about when I was a junior reporter back at the News Dispatch and I caught said criminal defense attorney wearing a $2,000 swanky ass suit, that very same dude, dropping $100 bills into a crystal candy dish on the deputy clerk's counter inside the clerk's office. And I observed this pattern when I was there on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays every week for 2 years, covering Superior Court 4 as part of my job for the News Dispatch as a junior reporter. And I ended up with a really solid source inside the clerk's office who gave the News Dispatch information, me and my publisher and a senior reporter, that this criminal defense attorney was bribing the deputy clerk using the candy dish. He'd just drop the hundreds in open view and he'd say, oh, I'll go get the girl's candy. Really, the allegation was that it was a bribe to keep his drug dealer clients out of the newspaper by keeping their files from me. So I was a 16-year-old junior reporter when I figured this shit out. And I figured it out because there was one particular guy who kept getting arrested. It was like a weekly thing. And it turns out he was dealing for the cop, Donnie Webb, who ended up going to federal prison for 7 years. Google it, okay? Michigan City, a history of corruption. He was paying the deputy clerk to pull the files from the court before I got there to copy the information. And I was looking for this one particular offender's file because I'd noticed he'd had 2 back-to-back arrests, but I wasn't getting his appearances. And people were actually calling the paper asking, why haven't we seen any follow-up? So I went in there looking for this one guy's file, and it wasn't there. And I started asking questions. Well, wasn't too long after that the shell casing ended up on the doormat of the News Dispatch with this 16-year-old kid's name on it. And I ended up being pulled off this story because it turns out I pissed off the biggest drug dealing cop in town along with the biggest coke dealing or coke using criminal defense attorney. And for the last few years, ever since Tara Stevens was hit, I've been dealing with dick after dick after dick from this law firm who also have problems sticking candy up their nose, who also happen to represent our dear friend KLM. See, people don't realize that a law firm in Michigan City represents one of the biggest dealers down in Carroll County. No Mercy 2026 is upon us. You killed my source. A man drove Sharon Chapel into Lake Michigan and expected Erica Morse not to get pissed. Guys, newsflash. The drop box is the nexus. Don't give me the credit. I didn't figure it out. That's all Prof. When he said that a few weeks ago, I was driving when I heard it, and I had to pull over on the freeway. It was like this combination of emotions in that moment. I was in shock. I was angry. I was bitter. I was resentful. And then I got really pissed at the trial lawyers in Gull. Because y'all don't know how many conversations and arguments we had over find us the nexus, find us the nexus, find us the nexus. And it kept being insinuated by the judge and even the prosecutor and even the trial team that the nexus had to be people, not a thing. It had to be a person or people, not a thing. The nexus is the drop box. The nexus is child trafficking. The nexus is child materials. Over the last 8 to 9 months, there has been an influx of arrests throughout Indiana. I told you months ago when Neil Lockman was sentenced to 54 years for child materials, and no one knew that arrest had even gone down. I said, give it 6 months and you're going to start seeing all of these pedos and chomos start dropping. And they're dropping. He made a plea, remember? A plea agreement. You don't make a plea agreement without giving something in return. We are there. We know what's up. Because no one had a fucking clue that Todd Matthews figured this shit out, lost his job at NamUs because of it, saw the writing on the wall for me and Chris ahead of time, and was smart enough to know that Erica was going to fight this fight all the way, that I was going to go to the mattresses so hard on this that it was probably going to get me killed. Todd knew me well enough to know that I was going to fight this. He made arrangements for my safety. Not a damn other person out in Delphi land can say that the head of NamUs trusted you to figure this shit out. So sit down, shut up, and learn things. Take your nonsense elsewhere. Children are being trafficked. We've known it all along. That's what this case is really about. I don't know all the little gory details yet, but I know a hell of a lot more than anyone realizes. And if it gets me dead, so be it. I got 2 anonymous sources that nobody knows about who will take this thing to the finish line, as will their network. Todd Matthews saw this, and he was going to be damned if they got the best of all of us. The drop box is the nexus. The drop box is the nexus. The Dropbox is the nexus. There was a little bit more I had planned to do tonight, but I think I'm going to stop here. I'm going to pull off at least one more episode this week, and we'll talk in that one about Jerry Holman's ex parte letter to Judge Gull. I'm going to read it on the air. I don't feel it's an appropriate transition at this moment. I think people really need to sit and fester on what has been presented here. And I think that the folks who are playing games over in Crankland need to take a step back and decide if they know what they know, because they don't. Some of you are putting your own selves in danger and don't even realize it. This is bigger than you can comprehend. And I was tasked by my mentor in exposing this. No one will put me in a position to let Todd down. No one. In addition to the Holman letter, we will also cover in our next episode a post that was made from former LaPorte County Chief, I guess he's the Chief Deputy Assistant District Attorney, Chuck Watterson. The leopards are beginning to eat each other's faces over in LaPorte County. We have lawyers turning on one another from the DA's office, and it's happening right on schedule. I have 9, count them 9, state bar complaints that I want to get filed in the next few days. We've been working on these for months. And it's time. It's time for folks to pay the piper. It's 2026. No mercy to be had anymore. You killed my source, and no one knew that I had been given a directive 2 years ago by one of the only people in the world left that I would trust, that what you see here is smoke and mirrors, and that this is all about child trafficking, which is why Prof hit the nail on the head when he exclaimed, the Dropbox is the nexus. The Dropbox is the nexus. The Dropbox is the nexus. Thank you for listening. It's been a hell of a night. Thank you for being here. Please reach out if you have information. You can reach me at victimsnewsonair@gmail.com. Leave a comment under here if you want. Or you can find me on Facebook at the Delphi Dirt. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you very soon. I will talk to you very soon. And I promise you, in 2026, we will be digging up more dirt, more Delphi dirt.